Hi guys, welcome to session 22 of Java Full Stack Made Easy. So in this session, we'll talk about the most awaited topic, that's gonna be collection. Collection is fun in Java. It's all about the data structure. But what is it? It is a ready-made data structure for us. So we will dive deep into the collection classes, what a collection interface looks like. That means collection API looks like, what interfaces are derived from it, what are the implementing classes, everything we'll talk about the collections. So let me just clean up everything that we have discussed before. So in the previous session we were talking about something called as custom exceptions, where we created real-time custom exceptions and we have utilized the keywords like throw and throws. So let's get started with collection, and before I start up with the collection, I'll show you some example related to arrays that we have already discussed in our previous sessions. Here I will create an array, which generally people say array is a collection of elements of similar type, that is same data type. So what I'm gonna do is I'll be creating a class. I'll call it as a collections demo for you. So this is a collections demo. And before I directly dive into the collections, if you remember, while dealing with the arrays, I have already explained you about the concept of a list, right? A linked list is something which we compared our array with, right? And in that case, what we got to know was, we got to know that arrays are better when there is a fixed size. That means, for example, if there are 50 students in a class, which will never grow or shrink. So in such scenarios, array is best suited. And if we don't know the number of students, it can increase or can decrease. In that case, collection would be an ideal thing, because arrays are of fixed size, whereas collection does not have any fixed size. So also while dealing with the arrays, we discussed that array is what? Homogeneous collection. That means collection of elements of same type. Here I'm going to create an array, not a collection. I'm going to create an array that will store different type of data. So let me tell you how do we do that. So I'm creating an array. You notice that what I'm creating an array of type object. So let's call this as maybe my collection is equal to new object of 10. So now what I can do is I can say my collection of 0 equals to new string hello, and I can say, so 10 objects I have already created. Here I have initialized it to 10. So my collection of 1 equals to 10, then my collection of 2 equal to 10.5 f, that is float. So I'm trying to store a string value, an integer value, and a float value in a array. It's an array. I did not create a collection. I've just named it as my collection, or let's name it as my array, so that you are not confused whether it is a collection or what. It's not a collection, it's just an array. That's how we declare an array, right? So we can create the arrays of even user defined classes. So I'm creating an array that holds 3 elements, my array, and we know that we can make use of the enhanced for loop that is specially meant for arrays and collections. So here what I'm going to do is I'll take this enhanced for loop, and obviously we know that it takes 2 arguments. So the second argument is the array on which it is working. So it's working on a my array. The first element is a array of variable of same type of array. So variables type is object. That's why I'm creating an object here. O dot. So O stores everything now. I'll just do a system.out.println O. So since it is a class type data type, so by default it is going to be null if I don't store anything. And 3 elements I have stored 0, 1 and 2. So all other elements by default will be null itself. So let's see whether it can store all the details or not first. So it is storing zeros everywhere. We get 0. Let's check what is it. Why are we getting 0 when we are trying to print this object? Okay. So what I was actually expecting was my array. Oh, that is because I have just printed 0 there. I did not print O. So let's save it and run it. So everywhere we are expecting it null. That's correct. That's because all the class type data types are null by default, and then we have this hello, 10 and 10.5. So a string type of data, int type of data, float type of data is stored in the same array. But didn't we discuss that array is a collection of elements of the same type? Yes, array still is a collection of elements of same type. Then if it is a collection of elements of same type, how can we store a string and an integer and the float? That's because this array is of type object. And object is a class in Java, which is a parent class for all the classes in Java. Any class you talk about. See, this is not an int. It is basically converting this int value into integer. That means the wrapper integer. And this is a float, but this is converted into a wrapper float. So if you look at float, int, byte, short, whatever, every class, let's say float class in Java. So if I say float class in Java, any class in Java, its parent class is object class itself. So you can see that I'm checking about a float class. On top of the hierarchy, you will always find this java.lang.object class, whether it is for float, or if suppose instead of checking for a float class, if I check it for maybe a string class, or a string buffer, or a string builder, or any class, any random class you check for in Java, it is going to tell you that object class is the parent in the hierarchy. So for float it was object, for string also it is java.lang.object. So remember one point, everything in Java is an object. That means all the classes that we create in Java is a child of object class. Fine. So that's why in this example that I am sharing you here, I am capable of storing a string, capable of storing an integer, and capable of storing a float. That's because I'm creating an object array. So this can be one of your OCJP questions, where if you are creating an object array, whether you will be able to store all these details or not. Yes, we can store all these details. So let me copy this. Looks like it is a heterogeneous collection, but it is a homogeneous collection itself, because we are telling that the collection itself is of type object. So day 22. Demo 1, object array. So this is a type of an object array. We can create an array of any type. We can even, if suppose we have an employee, we can create an array of employee, and we can store employee objects into it, right? So I'll give you one such example, so that in future whenever we are using these arrays or maybe collections and all, it will be easy for you to understand those things before we start up with the collection part. So here we go. I want to create an array of maybe, let's say, employee. So I'll create an employee class first. Let me check if I already have an employee class. So I don't, right? So let's create an employee class. New class, employee. There we go. An employee class will be created, and I'll create the collection of employee. That means details of employees array is something which I want to create. So here in an employee class, so let's see what is the error. The type employee is already defined. Okay. So let's define something else. Maybe let's define players and change the file name to players. So rename file to players. Looks good. Now this players will have what name of the player should be there, and then the jersey number of the player. So two things I want to add in, and the role of a player, whether a player is a batsman, bowler, or an all-rounder. So it will be string name, int jersey number, and then string role. We know that it should all be private, so that's the best practice. Even in future, if I'm not adding private, you add private to your code, because sometimes my focus is always on what? On the concepts. Fine. So I should give a default constructor. That is the best practice. I should also give a constructor that takes an argument. That's again a good practice, so that I can initialize all these values. I've given that. Then I need to have a toString, so that whenever I print an employee object, all the details of the employee, of the player is created. So I'll generate a toString method. Fine. So, and also to set and get the values, I need the getters and setters. So let's generate the getters and setters as well. So I've created an employee class with all the getters, setters, everything. So let me just save it. Players class, sorry, not an employee. Employee, I removed it. So let's now create the collection of players. That means array of players. So I am creating a players array. Let's make it as player instead of making it as players. It is just one single object, right? So let's call it as player and rename the file to player. This will all become player itself, not players. So let's create it as player. Looks good. Now let's go ahead and create the instance, that is array of type player, and we will call it as players is equal to new type player. And I would like to add, let's say, some 3 or 4, 5 players I want to add into this collection. Fine. So player objects has to be added into this array. So how do we do that? So we need to create player objects one by one. Player 1 is equal to new player, and I already have a player defined with a constructor that takes 3 arguments: name, jersey number, and role. You can see it here. So name should be given, then the jersey number, then the role. So let's give the jersey number 18, name, and then the role, batsman. Similarly, we will try and give more players, 2, 3, and 4. 5 players is what I want to give. Player 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I would like to give Rohit 45, then Rahul 1, wicketkeeper batsman, and then I would like to give Bumrah and Siraj. I actually don't remember their jersey number, so I'm giving some random jersey number for these 2 players. And then they are bowler. So this way I have created I have created objects of player. Now I want to add all these player objects into the array. So let's see how do we do that. So we can simply say players of 0 equals to player 1. Similarly, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Player 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So 5 players I have created, and then I'm done. All the player objects are added into this. Now if I want to get the details of a player, that means what is there in player of 0, player 1, right? So if I do a system.out.println, since I have already implemented a toString, so players of 0 should give me all the details about that particular player. When I print that, save it, run it, so I should get the first player details, that is Virat, jersey number 18, role batsman. This is only possible because I have given a toString method there. This way we can iterate over this and take it. So there are various other ways of doing it. Instead of creating this player 1, player 2, player 3, player 4 and adding it here, I could have directly done a player of 0 is equal to new player. Directly could have done that. Okay, just to make it simple for you, I have done this. In my later examples, I might directly do it this way. Fine. So if I wish to get all the player details, what I can easily do is I can create a function that gets me all the player details. So let me go ahead and create a function that way and get all the details about the player. So this is going to be void get details. So I'm just trying to show you what all things can be done. Okay, so because in future our programs can become more and more complicated, not complicated, more meaningful, you can say. So this get details will take the array of players. So players array, an array of type players it will take, and it will be players. And here I don't know how many players will be created. All the player details has to be given to me. So in this get details, what I'm gonna do is I'll be writing a for player of players. Okay, and then I'm just going to do a system.out.println. So this method is just going to print me the player. Okay, and in get details, whatever players I want to print, I can simply say, let's make it static so that we don't need an object reference to call it. Static void get player get details. So here I can go and say get details of all the players that I have created here. So it is going to print me all the player details. Let's run it, and there you go. All the 5 players were added into this and we are getting the details about that. Fine. So this way we can get the details about the players. Now comes another requirement. Let's analyze that requirement. See, as of now, I have still not started the concept of collections. We will definitely start the concept of collections, but I want to make things easy for you before we start up with the concept of collections. I am creating arrays. Still I am creating arrays, but these type of arrays which I am creating here are of type object. In previous all examples, I have created the arrays of simple, maybe string arrays, character arrays, integer arrays and all that. Now I am creating object arrays. So that is a bit more meaningful than creating the primitive arrays. Now one more requirement is that I want to get the names of the players. Fine. So how do I print the names of the players? Just the names. So let's also go ahead and get names of player or print player names or something. So public static print player names. This is what I want. So again, somebody is going to give me the players array, and out of that players array I just want the player dot get name. Just the name is something which I need. Now this method, if you called print player names, it is going to just print you the names of the players. Okay, so let's go ahead and print those player names and see that. Print player names, and this is the array. These are the players. I just want to print the names out of it. So let's save it. Let's also give system.out.println names. Okay, so this way I'll just be printing the player names. So let's save it, run it. So there we go. Just the names of the players are printed to you. So I'll first post this into the repository for you. Object array was created. Now I'm creating a players array. Demo2 players array. This is a player object, the model class I have created, and after that I'm creating a service for player where I have these two functionalities which prints the player, all player details and just the player names. Similarly, if I just want the player names to be displayed maybe in capital case, so what I am gonna do in that case? Okay, so if I just want to print the player names in capital cases, then the same method, print player names dot to uppercase. So if I add in to uppercase, all the player names will be displayed to me in capital case letters. I can see that Virat, Rohit, KL, Bumrah and Siraj. I can, if I wish to print only the jersey number, I can print only the jersey number. If I want to print the player name and the jersey number, I can do that. If I want to print the player name and the role of that particular player, I can do that. If I want to print only the bowlers, I can print that as well. Okay, let's just get the find players by role. Okay, let the user give me the role, whether he wants to get the bowlers or the batters. If a user says give me all the batsmen, then let's give the user the batsman. And if a user says that give me all the let's say bowlers, let's give back the user the bowlers. Okay, so let's say find player by role. This is something which I want to give, and here a user is going to give me the role, a string role, which can be a batsman, bowler or anything, because if you see that we have created these players here with the role batsman, bowler and all. So whatever player array we are giving, it has to find out the player based on the role, and then this can also return a player array, and that player array needs to be returned. The entire player object needs to be returned. Okay, so return. As for now, let's just return null. So how are we going to return that? There will be a player array, players is equal to new players, player of. Now we know that player object that is created, okay, all the players that I am creating here, I don't know, like maybe a 5 players, 10, 20 players, whatever players we are creating, those many players will be created. So what I can do is I can just create these players at the top and then get the length out of it. So as for now, I know that there are 5 players. I'm not doing it dynamically in this case. Okay, so let's take those 5 players. Okay, and yeah, instead of this players, based on the role, let them provide a players array to us, comma, player array should be provided to us. So based on that itself, we are going to iterate over it. Let the user, whoever is finding the player based on the role, let him give the players list as well as the role. So that's what we are thinking of now. For player in players, okay. What I have to find is find a player based on the role given by the user. So if a player dot get role dot equals ignore case the role, then what we need to do is we will be creating one more player instance. So now let's create the player array found players is equal to new player of. So this length of this player should be the length of players dot length, because if suppose tomorrow somebody creates a player like 10 players, they should work on those 10 players also. If somebody passes in the player for 20 players, it should work on that 20 players as well. So if the role is found, then what we are going to do is we will simply say player found player of 0, let's say found player of I is equal to player, and we will do a I plus plus. Now what is this I will be initializing one I here, so that every time a player is found, a player is added to the found players, and that's what I want to return. Okay, and in case, yeah, we can also return no player found and all that. Anyways, we will just return the found players. So now a user can also find the player. System.out.println. So what a user wants to find, let's see whether I have given it as static or not. No, let's make it static so that we call it without the object reference. So find player based on the role. So find players based on the role. What role? I want to find all the batsmen in players. So all the batsmen that are found to me will be, I want to print those things, right? So what I can do is I can just print the player details and get it here like this. So this particular function actually returns me all the players who are batsmen, and that actually goes to the get details, and get details will print me all the players who are batsmen. Okay, let's save it and find out that details. So let's run it. So only one batsman I have. No, I think I have created what batsman role. Yeah, 1 2 3 is what I'm expecting. So batsman, that's fine. So get details. Let's check now what is there. So I have provided two batsmen basically, batsman, and the found player of I equals to player, then I plus plus. Oh, sorry. So if that happens, I plus plus should happen, and again it should go there. So let's run this, and now you can see we have found two players. Okay, that's because Rahul is wicket keeper batsman, not just the batsman. So in that case, what we have to do is we have to again check if it contains, instead of saying equal to ignore case, instead of equals ignore case, we have to also we have to check if it contains the name batsman or not. Okay, so to include even that player, what we can do is player dot get role dot equals ignore case role, or contains the role, right? Or player dot get role dot contains the role. So in that case, I should be able to even find KL Rahul, because KL Rahul was wicketkeeper batsman. So this way we can actually play around with the array of objects. Fine. So I hope the code that I have written is clear to you. Here I am trying to find out the players based on the rule. So in the previous example, I found the batsman because Rahul is wicketkeeper batsman. That's why I am saying contains the rule. Okay. So I'll just put this as well into the repository. The model class is same itself. So demo 3 array of players extended. Player class will remain same in this case. I'll still give you the player class. The only agenda to show you all this is because to make you familiar with the concepts of object array. Now coming to the next point, that is I'll just clean up everything that I have written here and we will talk about the concept of collections. The very first demo about a collection. Fine, I hope this is clear to you. Let me just go ahead and create a main method. Now while dealing with the collection is what? Collection is a collection of elements of type object. Collection is collection of elements of type object. So when I say collection is a collection of elements of type object, it means that my collection will store object. It can store any type of data, because in the first example itself we have created an array of object, right? So when I was creating an array of object, it was storing everything. Similarly, when I create a collection, it can store anything. Fine. So collection is a collection of elements of type object in Java. So we know that arrays cannot be resized, but collections can be resized. So what you have to first do is, whenever you are discussing about the collection, whenever you want to talk about the collection, so you have to see a collection hierarchy. Okay, so we must see that to get an idea about this collections in Java. So here is the collection hierarchy. So any collection hierarchy you can take up and then understand each and every class out there. Okay, so I'll take any one of this. Sorry. So I'll take one collection hierarchy and show you the details about the collection classes. So let's take some collection hierarchy. Set list and queue. Okay, so you can see that the collection interface is there, and from the collection interface there are three interfaces derived: list, set, queue. And then there are maps which is not derived from this. Map is completely different. So we will talk about what are sets, what are queues, and what are list, sets and queues. We will talk about those things. And while creating, these are interfaces, whichever you see as blue in color here, these are all interfaces. These are the classes. Fine. So let me create about a list. Let's talk about a list now. What exactly a list? How to make use of a list in Java. So first of all, we know that a collection is a collection of element of type object. So you can take any collection hierarchy. There are more classes out here, so which we can find out as the session progresses. So we can talk about the collections and we can see what are the sets, what are the list, what all classes can be implemented, and all those can be discussed. Fine. So let me take any one of this here. So this is something which I was taking. So let's take this. So there is a collection of elements of type object. So out of collection, I want to choose a list now. So in the list, again we have a array list, linked list, vector, and the stack. So these are all list implementation. When it comes to a linked list, it is the implementation from the list as well as from the queue. So purely list implementation is array list and vector. So from a vector, stack is derived. So we will talk about just the array list versus vector first, and after that we can go for the other classes, the linked list and the stack and all that. So first let's talk about only the array list and the vector. Fine. So I'll talk about a vector. What is a vector and how do we create it? So let's just create a vector, Java util vector. So I'm creating a vector, v is equal to new vector. Now whenever I am creating a vector, you notice that it is giving me something like that. I will now create a vector without anything. So that is called as the generic which I have removed there. Generics were introduced into Java 1.5. I am showing you an example about a vector superior to Java 1.5. After that, I will introduce generics to you and tell you what is the advantage of using generics in collection. So I'm creating a vector v, and now inside this vector I will have a int x is equal to 10, and then I will create a float y equals to 10.5 f, and I'll create a string z equals to hello. So I'm creating different type of data here, and I want to add all these details to a vector. How do we add details to the vectors? Vector is a class. Okay, so this class actually implements a collection interface. So collection interface contains a method called as add method. So I can add details to the vector. So x, y, and z is something which I want to add. So x, y, z. So out of this collection hierarchy that I'm showing you, you have to pick up the collection that suits your requirement. What suits our requirement? Sometimes you want a unique collection, sometimes you want your collection to maintain the order, sometimes you want an unordered collection. So depending upon the requirement, we choose a collection. So here we have chosen a list. Okay, what is the advantage of using a list? List can contain duplicates. Okay, and list is ordered. There is a difference in ordering the list and sorting the list. Order means in the order which you have added it. Sorting means if it is a numeric list, if I can sort it in ascending order or a descending order. So as for now, the list is what? List can contain duplicates, and list is ordered. So I've added the details v.add x, y, z. So what I'm gonna do is I'll just do a system.out.println and print the list for you. So list contains three items of different types. Let me just run this and show you all that. So 10, 10.5 and hello can be stored in here. It means that this vector is of type object, like I showed you the first demo where I was creating an array of type object. Fine. And also you can notice it has maintained the order in which I have added the element. I added x, y, and z. So it is adding 10 first, then 10.5, then hello. So whichever element I add first, that element will be added first. So the order is maintained into a vector. Now what is the advantage of using a vector over a array? The advantage is that if I now see this vector plus I also want to see the vector dot, see everything is ready made for us in Java. Size, like a length method, here I have a size. What is the size of a vector now? The size of a vector is 3. What I will do after this is I will say vector dot add again. So now I am adding something into a vector. Let's say I want to add world into vector. It is all possible for me. So once I add that word, and after that if I check the size of it, so the size is 4, and then I will be printing system.out.println the vector after adding an element into it. So this we cannot do in an array, right? So arrays once created, they are of fixed size. Here vectors, size of vector can be changed. Even in vector, what is possible is that we can insert the elements at any given position into a vector. We can say v dot insert element at. So we can provide in the element and the index position. So element I want to enter here is, let's say John is something which I want to add, and at the index position 1. Okay, this was a vector before and this is the new vector. So I will print the new vector after inserting. So let's also say after insert. Let's save it and run. So these all functionalities are pre-created. So after insert, what has happened is I am saying insert John at first position, that is at the position 10.5 insert John, and all the other elements are automatically shifted. Okay, so this is what a collection is all about. But if you go in detail about the collections and array, is that arrays are faster, collections are slow. That's because every time you insert an element or do something to a collection, what happens is the previous elements will be removed, it will be added into a new vector, and then it will be created. So that is all happening behind the scenes. So we don't need to worry about that. So this is how vectors can be created. So we can also remove the elements from a vector. So if you want to remove an element, you can say vector dot remove. So index position, at the index position maybe 2, I want to remove the element. So at this level index position 2 is 10.5, So let's print the element after remove. So I'll copy this and then I'll say after remove print that vector. So I have to perform a remove. I think I've removed that. Anyways, yeah, this remove method is here. So after removing the index position 2, that is 10.5, it should give me the vector removing that 10.5 and rest all values should be there. So you can see that this was the vector 10 John 10.5 hello world. So I'm removing the element at 2, 0, 1 and 2, 10.5, that is gone and rest all elements are there. So this is the advantage of vector. That means your vectors can grow and shrink. Unlike arrays do not grow, arrays do not shrink at all, right? So this is the advantage of using vectors, which is a list. Okay, if it is a list, it maintains the order and it can contain duplicates. That means if suppose now 10 is already there in this vector, if I add 10 again, v dot add 10, it can contain that duplicate values. If it is a set, it does not contain the duplicate values. Let's save it and let's run this. So you can yeah, 10 index position 10. So let's add a 10 like this. V dot add int r is equal to 10. At the end position, we will be adding that. Let's save it and run. So here we have 10 already added. So you should not be confused with the index position and this values. I'll show you what is that later. Even in the previous example, I was adding this 10. So why I took a separate variable and added, that's a different story. I'll tell you that. So v dot add r 10 is added. So duplicate elements can present into vector, because it is a list implementation. So any list implementation class, like be it a ArrayList or a LinkedList or a vector or a stack, they can all contain duplicate elements. Whereas if you go with the sets do not contain duplicates. So this way things work in Java list. Okay, this is a list implementation which I am trying to perform. Fine. So not just the insert element at, we can also use the add method and then perform the things. Fine. So this is how it used to be before Java 1.5. So what was introduced into Java 1.5? Let me give you an example for that. So this is my demo for vector, and the usage of this type of vector is not at all recommended. That is why now in Java we see all these warnings. Whenever I'm adding an element, I'm seeing a warning, right? Type safety warning. So the problem with the collection was that collection was a collection of element of type object. So it was all what? Heterogeneous collection. So creating a heterogeneous collection has a problem. What is that? Suppose for example, I want to have a vector to add roll numbers. Suppose this is roll numbers. Okay, I am adding roll numbers of the student. So as for now, I'll just clean up everything so that it will be easy for us to understand it. So I can say roll numbers of student dot add what all roll numbers I want to add. Maybe I want to add 10, 20, 30, 40 and all that. So I'm adding 10, 20, 30, 40. So I'm adding the roll numbers. So while adding the roll numbers, I can also add what? Hello world. So this was possible before Java 1.5. Because it is what? It is just a vector collection of elements of type object. So hello world is an object, so it adds that system.out.println. So if you print roll numbers, so tell me, is it a valid roll number? Hello world is not a valid roll number. So this was the type of problems that we used to face before. So when Java 1.5 was introduced, generics were introduced into Java 1.5, and this is not recommended way of creating vectors, right? In most of the cases, most of the situations, maximum situations, we create homogeneous collections. We usually don't create heterogeneous collections. So if we are creating a heterogeneous collection, we have to specify it is a heterogeneous collection, but most of the cases we create a homogeneous collection itself. So this roll numbers is a collection of type what? Integer, right? So that is why while declaring the vector itself, I have to declare that I'm creating a vector of type integer. So this is how the syntax looks like. I have to create it that way. Then I can specify it like this, vector of type integer. This way we can define it, and then Now comes the problem here. It will not add it. It does not allow you to add it. See here, whenever I am trying to add hello world, it says the method add integer in type vector of type integer is not applicable for the arguments of type string. So we cannot do that. Fine. So now you can notice that when I am creating a vector of type integer, I can only add integer values. And see, syntax, both the syntax are valid. I may write this syntax, that is writing an integer here. This is also a valid syntax. The below one is a valid syntax and the above one is also a valid syntax. So usually you will see people declaring vectors like this. This is also a valid syntax. So they might ask you in the interview, or maybe when you are dealing with the OCJP, both the syntax will be given to you. Both are valid syntax. Now, what if I try something like this? While declaring the vector, I did not specify the type, but here I am specifying the type. No. So while declaring the vector itself, you have to specify the type. Here it is optional to specify, but while declaring, you have to specify it. Both are valid syntax of creating a vector. Okay, and also like this add method is overloaded. Now how is it overloaded? I can say roll number and then a add method dot add. So if you see this add, it takes a int index and integer element. That means I can insert, like it is like an insert element add. I can add the element anywhere I wish. So int index, I can say add the element, the next element which I am adding, add it at the second position. What element I want to add? I want to add the element 2000. So 2000 will be added 0, 1 and 2 here. Okay. So let's save it, run it, and there 2000 is added. So add method is overloaded that way. Fine. So I hope again this concept of implementing the vector is clear to you. And out of vector, what all methods we have seen? We have seen an insert element add, then we have seen a remove method, we have also seen a add method, and the overload of the add method also we have seen, right? Overload of a add method. So I'll just give you this, and this is the best way of creating a vector, okay? Because here we are creating a collection with only integer values. And also remember one very important point I will add. Whatever collections you are creating, be it a list, sets, maps, or whatever it is, collections work with objects. That means they work only with the wrapper classes. They don't work with the primitives. If suppose I add something like int here, it will not work that way. It does not work with a primitive type. It always works with the wrappers only, and they might also ask you questions like this, adding a primitive value and then ask you whether the created vector or a created collection is valid or not. Fine. So it is, and you might say, acha, if the vector is created of an integer, why are we adding this primitive values here, right? These are not primitive values, these are all wrapper classes only. That's because these values are auto boxed. Primitive values are converted into class type. So because of the auto boxing itself, it is possible to add a primitive value. Else collection works with only the wrapper classes. See, I can create a primitive x is equal to, let's say, 11. I can add that x here, a primitive value. But once I add an x here, it's not a primitive value. It is converted into a wrapper. Now, how can I tell you that it is converted into a wrapper? Correct, right? How can I prove you that? So let me prove you that. See, if I do a x dot, is there anything here? If I do a x dot, no methods, nothing. If it was an integer, we can get something, right? So out of a roll number, I can get something. So roll numbers dot get is a method that retrieves you an element on any specified index. So at the 0th index, I have this x, right? Now from that, if I want to get anything, I can get that. See, if I want to get an int value, long value of it, or anything, I can get. I can convert it into a string or anything. Fine. So you can see that I can convert it into a string by using a toString. So it is all the integer class methods. You see that? It's all the integer class method, byte value and all that. That's because the 0th element, although it was X, the moment it is added inside this roll numbers, it is converted into a integer, not int. Okay, so because of the auto boxing it is converted. So this get, if we do roll numbers dot get system dot out dot println, so what will happen is we get the first element here, and this is all auto boxing. So because of the auto boxing, this primitive is converted into a class type. Do remember this very important point. So I hope this session is getting a bit lengthy, but as for now I'll stop it here, and in the next session we will continue with the vector, and also we will talk much more about this list, sets, queues, collections, sorting the collections, maps, key value pair of the maps, and then what are sorted maps, and then all those details about the collection. Collection will be a lengthy topic for us, and obviously there will be some 3-4 sessions out of the collections itself. We will be creating collections with the user defined objects, like example I gave you for player and all. With the array I will create a players collections in future. Okay, so let me just put this into the repository and we will wind up this session now. Later we will continue with this session itself. Demo 5 vector. Okay, so you are now not creating a raw type of vector. Previously we used to create a raw type, now we are creating generic type vectors. Fine, this is which is what is recommended. If you go to my previous example, here when I was creating a vector, at that time I was creating a raw type. If you put a cursor on that, it will be showing you an error that a vector is of type raw. So we should never be creating raw type collections, be it a vector or anything. See, if I create another vector here of a raw type like this, v is equal to new vector, so at that time it starts giving me the problem. Raw type stuff. Vector is a raw type reference to generic type vector. E should be parameterized. That means it is telling us what? Don't create the raw type of vector, you create generic type of vector, because if you create a raw type of vector, at that time you might end up into problems. Like if you are creating roll numbers, if it is a raw type, any data can be added. But if you as a user knows that it should be a heterogeneous collection, then you create a vector. Still you need to create it as a generic type, and you at that time you mention it as object. So when you mention it as object, at that time it understands that okay, the user is intending to create a heterogeneous collection. So this is what is recommended, else it is going to give you warnings. Fine. So I hope this session was interesting for you. I'll try to make the collections very easy and more interesting, and more realistic examples we will use with every single collection. A lot of collection classes we will deal in the future as well. It is just the beginning of the collection. So in future we will be seeing how do we sort a collection, what are the concepts of array list, what is the difference between vector and array list, then what is linked list, what is priority queues, what are size restricted queues, and then what are maps, hash table, hash map. A lot of collection classes we will see in future. So stay tuned for this collection topics. See you in the next video, and do like, share, comment the videos to get a better reach. Thank you.